welcome back to the channel. It is now Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day. I am so excited to start this read along with you guys. I have never read this book. I have never read any other books by this author, so I am doing this alongside each and every one of you. So I hope that you can participate because I am so looking forward to a dialogue with all of you book lovers out there. So, we are going to be discussing the first 3 chapters of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte this week. And going forward, every week, every Thursday night at 9 p.m., I will be uploading an additional video that will be discussing 3 additional chapters. In chapter 1, we are introduced to a slew of characters. We have mentions of Mrs. Reed, a Bessie and an Abbot, Eliza, John, and Georgiana, and also Jane. So at the beginning of the book, Jane is talking about not being able to go for a walk. And she mentions her cousins, Eliza, John, and Georgiana, and she draws a comparison with her and her cousins. And we quickly find out that she is not deemed as an equal to her cousins. So she is not necessarily not a part of the family, but she is definitely not fitting in and being looked at as a family member should. Since Jane is the narrative voice of the novel, we can discover the characters and their characterizations through Jane's words and her observations. So in chapter 1, we observe that her cousins are not really good kids. I believe Jane observed them sitting around their mother in the drawing room, and she, quote, said, "For the time, neither quarreling nor crying." So typically, they're either fighting or arguing with each other, or not displaying good manners, or whining about something. Okay, at this point, Jane has not spoken in the story, and this is the first time that Jane has spoken. But I want to preface that with a paragraph before she first speaks, because it is in a response to Mrs. Reed, which is her aunt. Mrs. Reed is again surrounded by her children in the drawing room, and she is keeping Jane at a distance, so she's kind of across the room. She's not allowed to join them. Me, she had dispensed from joining the group, saying she regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at a distance, but that until she heard from Bessie and could discover by her own observation that I was endeavoring in good earnest to acquire a more sociable and childlike disposition, a more attractive and sprightly manner, something lighter, franker, more natural, as it were, she really must exclude me from privileges intended only for contented, happy little children. And then Jane replies, "What does Bessie say I have done?" And then Mrs. Reed follows, "Jane, I don't like cavillers or questioners. Besides, there is something truly forbidding in a child to take up her elders in that manner. Be seated somewhere, and until you can speak pleasantly, remain silent." So we get a glimpse of a little bit of animosity. Mrs. Reed, for some reason, does not like Jane. And Jane is not afraid to push back a little bit. And she is, through her question, she is trying to stand up for herself. So at this point, we realize the loneliness that Jane is feeling, because so far she has no one, and she's kind of been dispelled from the family, and all she has is her book. So she is using reading as a way to fulfill that sense of loneliness instead of just moping around, being a grump, being angry. So she's kind of using a book as a means of escape or as a means of connection because she's not getting that feeling anywhere else. So she goes into this next room. I think that she opens a curtain and there's like a little window sill and she sits on that and closes the curtain. And she begins to read. And there's a lot of symbolism in the book that she's reading. She mentions in an excerpt here, the words in these introductory pages connected themselves with the succeeding vignettes and gave significance to the rock standing up alone. The rock standing up alone in a sea of billow and spray, to the broken boat stranded on a desolate coast, to the cold and ghastly moon glancing through bars of cloud at a wreck just sinking. The symbolism here, she is connecting her feelings of loneliness to these objects and their feelings of loneliness and despair. Um, so she is diving into this book. She's finally feeling happy in her own way. She doesn't want to be interrupted because she's got this feeling of happiness, but yet she gets interrupted, and it's her cousin John. He comes looking for her, and he is mad. He is very angry because he can't find her because she's drawn that curtain. So he starts yelling out for her, and the other cousins follow suit. She comes out from behind the curtain, and nothing good happens. Um, he starts to taunt her. He forces her to call him Master Reed, and he just basically reinforces her feeling of loneliness and her feeling of not being a part of the family. He straight up tells her, you know, you're less than family. You're basically like a servant, and you must serve me. So I think it's important to note that Jane is Jane is a 10-year-old orphan. So her her uncle took her in when her parents passed, and her uncle died. So she was left with this family. All she has left is her aunts and her cousins, or so she knows. That's all that she knows of at this point. But yeah, she's viewed more like a servant than as a family member. She's viewed as a stressor, as a um, just something that they have to deal with at this point because the uncle's gone. The uncle was the only one that truly loved her or showed any sort of care and love towards her. So this is what she's left with, and it's kind of sad. John is a bully. John is terrible. John is so mean. He's like a little tyrant. And Mrs. Reed does not seem to notice, and if she does notice it, then she does not seem to care. I don't know whether she allowed that to happen because he is essentially the only man left in the house. It's him and her two other daughters, and she's there by herself. So I don't know if she's allowed this to happen, if she's created him into the tyrant that he is, but he throws a book at Jane in a punishment because she did not answer to him. And we have to experience that along with Jane. I mean, the book that she was reading, she had to give it to him, and he made her stand still, and he threw it and whacked her upside the head enough and hard enough for it to draw blood. So this character, a lot of people are gonna hate him because of that, and he's abusive. He's highly abusive. And then Mrs. Reed comes in alongside, you know, Bessie, and they blame it all on Jane because She antagonized John. She started it. And they didn't even ask what happened. They just immediately went straight to it was Jane's fault that this happened. And they wanted to punish her. So they punished her. And they sent her to what's called the Red Room. And um, they Mrs. Reed said to lock her in there. So the moment that she shows her independence and courage, they rip it away and they punish her for it. So the end of the book, she's being dragged upstairs to the Red Room. So Jane's voice, she's courageous, she's honest, she's repressed, and it's almost as though she's one of the servants. But then the actual servants are against her as well. So she's either more of a servant or less than a servant. And that's very, very confusing, especially to a 10-year-old girl. You live in this home, your parents are all gone, and your uncle has passed. So you're left with family members who don't treat you as family members. Even the servants don't hold you in a high regard. Who are you? I think that's the question that she is asking herself. And in fighting back, she's trying to figure that out. She's asking Mrs. Reed, why? What has Bessie said that I've done? Why can't I be a part of this family, essentially? Why do you look at me differently? And then snapping at her cousin John for his tyranny and physical assault on her. She's basically telling him how she feels. And that's powerful. That is very powerful because we can go throughout our daily lives and have opinions and judgments on people. And they always say, don't judge people. We all judge people. We judge people on a daily basis. That's natural. That's a human tendency. That's a survival mechanism. We size people up. What is it to tell someone exactly who they are as they are seen? She chose to use her words to fight him back. And I thought that was just so brave and so courageous of her. And it was this first moment that I really grew a liking to this character. So in chapter 2, the opening statement is, I resisted all the way, a new thing for me. I love that. I love that. Her courage doesn't last that long. It's replaced with self-doubt, self-pity, shame, and she becomes scared because this red room is where her uncle passed, and it is deemed haunted by the family. And they are being cruel to Jane and locking her in this haunted room. She still feels a little bit of that courage, but it's slowly dissipating because the superstitions of the haunted room is in the back of her mind, but it hasn't truly set in yet that she's locked in this room. So before she comes to complete and total hopelessness, she once again compares herself to the rest of the family and asks herself why this is happening to her. Who is she? What is she supposed to be? How is she supposed to fit in? All John Reed's violent tyrannies, all his sister's proud indifference, all his mother's aversion, all the servants' partiality, turned up in my disturbed mind like a dark deposit in a turbid well. Why was I always suffering, always browbeaten, always accused, forever condemned? Why could I never please? Why was it useless to try to win anyone's favor? Eliza, who was headstrong and selfish, was respected. Georgiana, who had a spoiled temper, a very acrid spite, a captious and insolent carriage, was universally indulged. Her beauty, her pink cheeks and golden curls seemed to give delight to all who looked at her, and to purchase indemnity for every fault. John no one thwarted, much less punished, though he twisted the necks of the pigeons, killed the little pea chicks, set the dogs at the sheep, stripped the hothouse vines of their fruit, and broke the buds off the choicest plants in the conservatory. He called his mother old girl, too, sometimes reviled her for her dark skin similar to his own, bluntly disregarded her wishes, not unfrequently tore and spoiled her silk attire, and he was still her own darling. I dared commit no fault. I strove to fulfill every duty, and I was termed naughty and tiresome, sullen and sneaking from morning to noon, from noon to night. So, in drawing these comparisons, she's trying to figure out what to do. She feels hopeless. She does not know how to gain their affections and love. So her courage starts to sink, and she describes her habitual mood of humiliation, self-doubt, and forlorn depression as coming back. So she starts to think in this red room of her uncle's ghost, and she kind of freaks out a little bit. She feels powerless, um, and she starts to scare herself by her thoughts of revenge in a terrifying form of her uncle's spirit. So she's thinking to herself that her uncle's spirit's going to come and show himself to her. And that's scary for a 10-year-old. A ghost, any ghost is scary. So she's a prisoner, essentially, in this red room, and she's trying to figure out how she can get her own justice. How can she get out of her situation? She's begging Mrs. Reed to let her out, and Mrs. Reed won't do it. And she says, "Oh, Aunt, have pity, forgive me. I cannot endure it. Let me be punished some other way." And she faints. So chapter 3 opens with Jane. She's no longer in the Red Room. She is being taken care of by Bessie and Abbott and an apothecary that was called by Mrs. Reed. Mrs. Reed and her children have left in the carriage. Not exactly sure if I remember where they went. It just says that they are gone. So, Jane confides in Mr. Lloyd and tells him everything that happened. And Bessie's trying to interject and create a false narrative about what really happened. And Jane's not allowing her to do that. She is telling him exactly what happened. John Reed knocked me down. My aunt shut me up in the red room. I'm not happy here. I don't have any family. I don't have any brothers or sisters. He's asking her why she's not happy in this beautiful home. Would you rather go and live with your other family members? Jane's contemplating this. She is aware of other family members that she has, but she's been told that they are poor, and she's been taught that poor is a negative thing. It's all negative connotations with the poor. They are rude. They are just not someone that you want to be around. So she is choosing her current situation over going and venturing off with her other family members. So this all ends with Mr. Lloyd asking Jane if she wants to go to school. She loves that idea. And Mrs. Reed, ironically, loves it too because it's a way for her to get rid of Jane, if only for a little while. So they are going to send her to school. Jane overhears another conversation between Abbott and Bessie, and they are kind of pitied. Um, they're kind of pitying Jane in the fact that she's not pretty. She doesn't have a pretty face. So in essence, they're trying to say that pretty faces deserve to get treated better, in a sense. Abbott says if she were a nice, pretty child, one might be compassionate her forlornness, but one really cannot care for such a little toad as that. Not a great deal, to be sure, agreed Bessie. At any rate, a beauty like Miss Georgiana would be more moving in the same condition. So, beauty deserves compassion to them. Beauty deserves special treatment. But what about knowledge? What about courage? What about will and resolve? What about honesty? What does that deserve? So Jane overhears a conversation between Bessie and Abbott on the story of Jane's parents and the fact that Jane's mother came from a well-off family and Jane's father did not. But Jane's mother fell in love with her father and chose to marry for love and not marry for money. And in doing so, she was basically cast out from her own family. So Jane's grandfather stopped any sort of money um, going to her mother once she decided that she was going to run off and marry Jane's father because he was poor. He was a poor man and he did not want that for his daughter. So her mother was cast away, just like Jane is feeling this sense of being cast away. And I think that through that story, she is feeling a connection. She is feeling more close to her mother and drawing more courage from that. So, the end of the chapter, we discover that Jane gets to start school. Mrs. Reed has agreed to it because she is thrilled to get rid of Jane. So, Jane's thrilled to go to school and to learn because Jane is a smart girl. And I think this is a good thing for her because she can expose herself to other students and hopefully she can find someone that she can confide in.